Welcome to SERVOsoft, Size Complete Servo Systems. This tutorial highlights SERVOsoft's import trace feature. This tutorial stands on its own, but it does build on the complex dynamic loads tutorial. If you would like to learn how the thrust formula was created, make sure to watch the complex dynamic loads tutorial. Please note that the import trace feature is available only in the SERVOsoft Advanced and Pro versions. The import trace feature imports a trace and overlays it on top of its calculated profile in the sequence chart. A trace can be any profile that is selectable to be displayed in the sequence form, but typically the most commonly imported traces are load position, load speed, motor current, motor speed, motor accel. The import trace feature is ideal for benchmarking and design validation because it allows you to directly compare calculated profiles with measured profiles. And when they do not match, it is very clear where the differences are and what changes need to be made. Here is how. First, I will start with the project shown here. As I mentioned earlier, it is the electric screw project from the complex dynamic loads tutorial, where the thrust load formula was used to model the dynamic load. And here we have the sequence already opened, and see the load velocity on the top, the load thrust in the middle, and the inverter current profile on the bottom chart. Here is my spreadsheet, which contains an imported trace of the motor current and load velocity versus time. First, I will import the load velocity to confirm it matches the one in SERVOsoft, and then later I will import the motor current trace. To import a trace, we open the Select Profiles form. Notice the existing 3 calculated profiles at 1, 3, and 5. The imported trace profiles will be at 2 and 6. I did this so that the calculated and trace profiles are displayed on the same plot. To import the load velocity, I will enable Profile 2 and then Load and Velocity. First, I will select the data in Excel and then copy it to the clipboard. Now I will open the Import Trace form. There are several ways to import the data. You can import from a text or Excel file, or you can paste from the clipboard. I already have the data copied to the clipboard, so I will click the Paste from Clipboard button. Now you can see the data listed in the table. Once the data is loaded, you can choose some format conditions, such as if the data has a header row or column. And you can also specify the delimiter for how the data will be parsed. In this case, both settings are fine. Note that data copied to the clipboard from Excel is tab delimited, and this is why tab is the default delimiter. There are a few things you can do to manage the imported data. First, you can include a description or comment. In this case, I will type in load velocity import trace August 1st. Next, let's look at the offset. The offset allows you to shift the profile back and forward in time. This is very useful when the import trace time values are shifted with respect to the calculated profile. As an example, I will set the offset to -0.5, and then later in this tutorial, I will come back and set it to 0. To apply offset value on the data, I will click the Update button. Notice how the start time is -0.5 seconds. The scale factors are a convenient way to adjust the trace data to units available in SERVOsoft. The scale factors are also useful in adjusting data from oscilloscopes that use custom units, or even from drives and transducers that provide an analog signal, such as plus or minus 10 volts. In my case, the data is in standard units, so I will leave the scale factors at 1. Finally, the units here must be set to match my data, which in this case is time in seconds and velocity in RPM. All looks good, so I will click OK to accept the imported data and the settings that I have chosen. Notice now that the Import Trace button is green, indicating the data has been imported successfully. And if I hover over the button, it will provide a tooltip summary of the data. Now I will click OK again to close the Select Profiles form. Now we see my imported velocity profile, shifted by -0.5 seconds. I did this to show the offset feature. In this case, we don't need an offset, so now I will go back and set it to 0. Now with the offset at 0, our calculated and imported velocity profiles match exactly. I'll confirm this by selecting the calculated profile in the legend to make the line thicker behind the orange trace profile. First, I'll make the chart bigger by selecting Profiles Only. This is an important step to confirm the programmed and actual motion profiles match. Now let's import the motor current trace to confirm all inputs such as load inertia and thrust load match the actual measured application. I will use profile 6 for the inverter current, since it is grouped with profile 5 when 2 profiles per plot is selected. Now I will select the current trace data in Excel and then copy it to the clipboard. And now I will paste the data into the import trace form. All the settings are fine. I will enter a description. The units are good, so I will click OK to accept the imported data and the settings I have chosen. Notice now that the import trace button is green, indicating the data has been imported successfully. And if I hover over the button, it will provide a tooltip summary of the data. Now I will click OK to close the Select Profiles form. Here we have the velocity trace overlapping perfectly, confirming the motion profile is a match. And the current trace overlaps very nicely, with some noise in the current trace, which is typical. But what if the current trace does not match? Let's change the constant in the thrust formula from 900 Newton meters to 1200 Newton meters and see what happens. What I want to point out is that SERVOsoft is aware that the trace and calculated profiles need to be scaled the same. As you can see, the imported trace maximum and minimum range for the Y scale is forced to be the same as the calculated profile. This makes it easy to see where the differences are, and then make adjustments to the load values, thrust formula, etc. In this case, the difference is a shift, as we know. So I will change the constant in the thrust formula back to 900 Newton meters by selecting Undo. And we are back to 900 Newton meters in the thrust formula. As you can see, the import trace feature is ideal for benchmarking and design validation because it allows you to directly compare calculated and measured profiles, and when they do not match, it is very clear where the differences are and what changes need to be made. This concludes the SERVOsoft tutorial on the import trace feature. Thank you.